All right. Welcome to season 2, episode 1 of the Blueprint Tour.
Episode 8.
Oh my God.
Were we muted?
No, we're not recording.
Oh no.
With permission, I'm here with Duke, Charlie, and Adam. We did a good warm-up round just now, and we are chilling.
Take 2.
And we're just chilling here at Graybo. Carter and Kenny from PermaZip. Go to our website, check out the instant quote online, and you will find a really easy way to calculate prices for MEP. And we just got done with a really good practice round of how a podcast could go. for all of you that are listening in live, you got to get the full experience. But in the post production, it's a very different situation. So let's give we got more people on right now. So why don't you run through it again?
Well, hey guys, thanks for coming. I'm Duke Dodson. This is Charlie Nelson and Adam Tiller, the Dodson Development Group. We're sitting in what is soon to be Graybo Sports Cards and Parlay Bar Lounge. Unique concept of merging a traditional sports card and hobby shop with a sports bar. Somewhere where you can not only buy sports cards, but watch a game, have a fancy football draft, have a watch party, kid's birthday party, etc. And so if you're a fan of sports or sports cards, I think you'll be a fan of this place.
Yeah, very cool concept. The idea that you could stream live and chill here while you're drinking. So people that are actually paying for the card packs and all that can actually chill here, drink beers, have food, and watch the live stream of it. That's happening right over there next door, right?
Like during COVID, it became popular to buy sports cards on your phone, like through an app where you can basically virtually go into someone's shop, pick out what you want to buy. They open it for you right in front of you. You see what you get, and then they ship it to you. That became pretty popular.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do that in the shop live, and you can sit on your couch and buy cards. You can come into the store and do it, and you can, as you just mentioned, you can actually buy into a break on that side and watch it on the TV on the sports bar side and eat and drink. And it's it feels like a form of kind of gambling. You don't know what you're going to get, right? And so it's pretty much a form of entertainment, and love the sports.
Buy into a break. So tell us about that. Just that sounds so cool.
A concept of a break. So like, let's say you could go over there and buy an entire box. Let's say a $600 box of cards if you want for yourself, or you could just buy one team. So like in a break, we might sell all the teams individually. You buy the Yankees, you buy the Red Sox, you buy the Cubs, for example, and we open up the entire box, and you get the Red Sox, you get the Yankees, you get the Cubs.
Interesting. Yeah. So I wouldn't know which team to choose because I was a skateboarder in high school. So
it's like the same as Pokemon cards.
I'll say Pokemon's big. Like there's pop culture cards, but there's a whole setup called Pop Century where you buy a pack, you open it up. There's only 4 cards, but they're all autographed, and it's four different celebrities. Might be actors, might be hip hop artists, might be a skateboarder, might be Tony Hawk has autos. Like there's a lot. Collecting has been around forever, right? And it's just a different form of it where you can buy someone's autographed card, and there might be a finite amount of them. There might be like just 10 of these or just 20 of these.
So you mentioned there's some of the operators from the other project that are helping you kind of get things going on the back house here.
Correct. Yeah. So we didn't want food to be an afterthought. We wanted to be a legit craft cocktail menu. We wanted great food. And so Robin and Kelsey, who are partners with us on the 2 restaurants in Colonial Beach, Drift and Muse, they're overseeing the food and front of house operations here as well. And so there's some of the menu items are similar to Muse that you guys went to. Pizza's the same, and some of the other appetizers are the same.
Yeah.
We made some changes here to make it more sports bar like, but yeah, very similar.
So but if you're just tuning in, we got the team from the Dodson Development Team, Duke and Charlie and Adam, right? So we've worked with them a lot. I've just met Charlie, I think, for the first time actually doing this survey, right? That's where I think I met you. And so if you're tuning in, there's a link. You can come and ask them anything, right? I mean, anything these guys know. Construction nerd and underwriting nerd, I'm sure. I'm not quite sure what you know. And this is an underwriting and development master throughout Richmond, legendary Duke Dodson. And
I'll take the sports betting questions and anything development related. These 2 guys can answer.
Okay, yeah. If you're into sports betting, here's your inside scoop here. Hey, tell me about what happened recently in the golf situation. Some dude just got arrested.
So Scotty Scheffler, who's the best golfer in the world, he's on TV right now. He was driving to the course like at 6 a.m. And there was like cops in the road with their lights on because there had just been an accident. And he started driving around them, and they told him to stop. And he, I guess, didn't see it, so he just kept driving. And so they chased him down, ripped him out of his car, took him to jail.
Wow.
and he was in jail for 3 hours this morning. Got arrested. Got a mugshot. 2nd-degree assault.
Oh
Evading
my
police,
God.
all these charges.
Holy.
Oof.
And then he got back to the course at 9 a.m. Teed off at 10, and he's in 3rd place.
Nice.
Oh my God. That's
Unfazed,
crazy.
completely unfazed.
He's like, yeah, I just got a mugshot because I saw
Yeah.
like on Twitter everywhere. There's like mugshots of him and everything, and I'm like, what's going on? And
Yeah,
and here he is. So that's the story. I saw
All
Carter.
right.
I was like, I
Yep.
think that guy got arrested this morning.
he did. He did.
Look,
Yep.
there it is on the TV right
Yep.
now.
Yeah, if you could see, right now there's the cars are there. You go in the background. You can see the TVs behind us. Again, if you're tuning in, go ahead and call in if you want to ask questions or just give us a comment. And Stuart Evans.
Are y'all saying buying sports cars or watch sports? He said, "Oh, cards."
To be clear, if you're listening, cards with a D,
D.
not cars. But
Correct.
Stuart actually has a cool business where he renovates. What are they?
Like Jeeps and
Yeah, it's a specific kind of car. Sorry, Stuart, from butchering it, but he's got a warehouse like 3 of these things, super
like
custom
G-Wagons or
cars.
something.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. You got to see it.
Wow.
Anyhow, so we got construction conversations that we'll have. We're talking about design in general, but I do want to dive in a little bit more on this building, the design of what how you decided to make this purchase or get into it. What does that look like? What does that look like for somebody like you putting this business in? Plus, there's some leasing going on here as well. Like how
Yeah, so like I would say what makes us a little unique is that we're real estate developers, but we also have a side of our business that owns and operates small businesses. And over the course of doing development the last 15 years, we have found that one of the most difficult parts of real estate development is when there's a big commercial vacancy. The bank underwrites it as being vacant forever, assumes you'll never rent it. Whereas if it's residential, they'll assume you'll fill that vacancy in a month. And so it just creates a problem. And by us being able to successfully plug in some of our businesses that we either own or partner on and to fill a hole can make us a buyer when someone else might not be a buyer. This particular property, for example, this is great developable land one day. We're in Scott's Addition. Like, I'm sure one day this will be an apartment building, but the price the guy was asking, he was asking more than if it was raw land. So he was selling it as if it was an income producing property, but it had one big vacancy next door.
Yeah.
And then this was going to be a vacancy in 6 months later, because we knew the circuit was going to shut down. So when we looked at it, we were able to move our corporate office in next door to fill that hole. And we had been looking for a place for Graybos, and it just worked out where we could move Dodson companies in next door, move Graybos and Parlay in here, and that made us a buyer. And we were able to buy this when someone else might not be able to.
So what you're referring to is the cap rate sort of calculation there, where if you like the free cash flow divided, isn't that how that's calculated?
Yeah. So like if you're a bank, right, and you're looking at what income is this property going to bring in, if it was all apartments, even if it was vacant, they are going to assume you're going to rent those apartments one day. But if it's commercial, they don't know if you're going to rent the commercial space in 3 months or 12 months. So they're going to basically underwrite it as if it's empty.
Yeah. So
Forever.
that doesn't count to your free cash flow, $0,
Right.
which is a direct reflection of its value, is the way they figure out its value, right?
Yeah. And how much they're going to lend on it. So like if it's 40% vacant, they're going to, normally in a deal where you might have to put 30% down, you might have to put 50 or 60 or 70% down to buy this building. But if we can buy it with 2 leases signed already, it's not vacant now, it's full.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Interesting. So you did that because these are your, you're putting this, you're going to have this business here, and then you're going to lease this section here. So
Right.
you can say, we already have this cash flow in place right now today. And
Correct.
that amount is exceeding whatever was happening before you bought it. So you can basically add value right day one, like just doing that. That's what's
Correct.
crazy to me about real estate developers is the
Yeah.
creativity that goes into the whole pro forma or the, the whole tabulation, the calculation. It's insane. There was on Twitter, there's this guy, the warehouse, you might like this. He bought a warehouse by, storage units. He was like, made an offer to say, I'll take over the operations completely of this. And then 2 years, I want to have the right to buy this for $500,000. But in the meantime, I'm going to pay $2,000 a month or whatever it was as rent. And then I'll take whatever's after this. So it's mail check money for you. And I'll do operations, take over this. And so the idea was to increase the free cash flow during that time so that after 2 years, he could buy it for $500,000. Maybe it's $1 million property.
Right.
And then he gives himself 1 extra year to make it a 3rd year.
Right.
As an extension into that idea. And I'm like, that's fucking brilliant. Holy shit. $0 into this thing. And the worst case is best for both parties too.
Right.
This guy gets $2,000 a month, completely steps out of the business and gets the buyout at the end. And a worst case scenario is if the guy doesn't buy the property, he just got free rent for 3 years.
Right.
It's brilliant. I mean, like, why can't engineers be that creative?
Well, you guys are creative in different ways, but yeah, like in commercial real estate, like anything's negotiable. It's like the Wild West. Whereas if you come up, I came up on the residential side. You have the Residential Landlord Tenant Act, which governs almost everything, what you can and can't do, and then you have this very little wiggle room. Like for example, late fees can't exceed 10% of rent, and security deposits can't exceed 2 months. All these like rules, right? The
Yeah.
commercial side is the Wild West,
Yeah.
because the law assumes both parties are intelligent adults that can make their own minds up. So anything you want to negotiate is out there.
Yeah. That's wild. Are there other? So to me, that's why I think developers and that whatever happens and how you guys put together the deals is part of this design discussion. It's not
Mhm.
intended to be how does MEP design work. I mean, we can dive into that all day. We unfortunately the live people caught it, but we missed a cool conversation on design, time delay and all that. But what other things come into play when you're just trying to be creative and just make a deal work? And
Well, I mean, I think this deal is a great example of how like you guys are valuable and how Adam and Charlie are valuable on being creative. Like if you guys hadn't saved us money on HVAC, deal wouldn't have worked. If you hadn't saved us money on minimizing the kitchen equipment, and because of that, we kind of built the business plan around that. This deal wouldn't have worked. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And so, like, yeah, creativity. There's a lot of ways to be. You can be financially creative. You could be design creative, and you could be business creative as well. But something like this, if you look at like you were in the Drift and Muse building, brand new construction, very expensive building,
Mhm.
beautiful, love it. But we spent a lot more on the build outs of those restaurants. It's brand new, everything's brand new here. We were able to use a lot of the existing everything, and we were able to build this place out very cheaply compared to that project.
Yeah, yeah, and is that present a challenge on sourcing contractors and stuff, and like the smaller project or lighter renovation where it's maybe less attractive to some GCs? How does that look?
Yeah, I mean, these days it's so hard to get any new jobs off the ground. I mean, so a lot of things are adaptive reuse. Um, so really, like we talk about discount to replacement costs when you're a developer,
Mhm.
and that basically means can I build this building and this operation for less than what I can buy it for? And these days, there's really not. It doesn't really exist.
Mhm.
You know, we can buy a building and renovate it for pretty much or the same cost or less
Mhm.
than going ground up. And so it's just this weird environment where you're not getting that discount to replacement. So we're looking at a lot of things like adaptive reuse. And I'll add, so when we first looked at this building, um, it was maybe late 2022. It was whenever it was before interest rates started really skyrocketing.
Mhm.
And so we were kind of looking at it at first play as like hey, can we turn this into an apartment building? I mean, everything that was just when everything was crazy going up. We're sub 4% rates.
Yeah.
And it was a really attractive location for that. So we looked at it that way and we got it under contract. And then, things started changing. And then, like Duke said, we had to get creative. And so we've had to do that with several different projects. And that's where we kind of saw the tide shift and saying, hey, the dollar per square foot that we're buying this building for is actually still really attractive.
Yeah.
And then can we make it work with market rates? Can we make it work, in some other way? And so we start pivoting to that.
You said something to replacement. What was that phrase?
Discount to
Can
replacement.
you walk
cost.
through what that means?
That basically means can I buy a structure or building and either it's ready to go, you don't need to make any renovations or value add on it, or you can buy it at a certain price and the value add you put into it is going to be less than what you develop like a brand new development.
Mm.
So say this building, if we were to go ground up and it was just an empty site, it may cost us all in $300 per square foot. That's just how expensive things can be these days.
Yeah, geez.
And then we may buy
Wow.
it for maybe half that, and then put $50 to $75 a square foot in it, and then we're already lower and achieving the same rental rates that we would get.
Yeah.
And so that's the the value that we see today and how to make certain deals work.
So if you're just tuning in, Adam is like low key and like a just genius mastermind. We love working with that. And he's like low key here. I know we talked to Duke last time. If you're
He's
with
low
us,
key. You're like a high key
Yeah.
genius. He's a low key
It may
genius.
sound complicated, but it's like a lot of developers are seeing that today, and it's definitely something we hope is going to turn around. And there's some development deals that we've gotten creative, like Duke mentioned, in different ways. There's grants, there's other things you can do with abatements with the city
yeah,
that can get you where you need to get. But we're trying to get creative in those too for new developments.
yeah, that's wild. I also appreciate your looks like my mom might have clicked a link if that's Kelly Shultz. Hey mom, if you want to join, just let me know in the comments and you can hop on in here. But one of the things I really appreciate with you, Adam, is you're good at understanding all of the professionals around you like the judgment calls being made, and you're good at asking more questions to try to like get a feel for it. But even like with our initial fee, you're like, hey, you're like, I want to work with you, but I was thinking it would be here. You're really good at being transparent and honest with where you want to go, but also making a good selection based on value. And somehow that's a I don't know if that's a natural talent or if it's a trainable thing. What is your perspective? I mean, to me, you seem very natural.
Like I think I've learned a lot just with interactions. I've definitely have learned a lot of empathy from people like Duke and previous bosses, and like you really got to put yourself in your consultants and other team members' shoes, and ultimately we are working on this all together.
Yeah.
And so I do think it's something that you can learn. I try to be an open and honest person. I think all three of us do. That's
Mhm.
just a central tenet of how we operate. But ultimately it's just you can learn a lot more just by listening and not trying. A lot of developers are really smart, really intelligent, and ambitious, and I think they know exactly what they want and need, and they want to call all the shots. I think we like to work a little more collaboratively and get input and feedback from the people that we work with.
Yeah.
And I'll say is Adam's too modest. Like to answer your question too, like what makes him unique in the development world is he is trained in finance heavily, like very heavy finance training, but
Mhm.
also in construction. And he's worked in construction, and he seeks to understand. Like if you guys tell me something, I just take it at face value. Okay, fine, do it. He wants to understand it, and he's going to learn. He doesn't know everything what you guys know about your trade, but he knows way more than I do, and he does that with all the trades. And so he gains that knowledge, and that's going to help him and us down the road immensely, because it's going to save us money. It's going to save us time. As he knows who to listen to
Yeah.
and who not to, because not every vendor is as good at what they do
Yeah.
as you guys are, right? Sometimes you
Well, we're
learn
the
that
best. I mean, we're
so you learn that but you learn that the hard way.
Yeah.
And you haven't got to this question yet, but I just want to throw this out there for developers listening. Like
Yeah.
the incident we had, maybe 2 weeks ago, Friday, maybe, when we called you guys into panic on a Friday. That's just a unique situation, but it happens in development all the time. We failed our electrical inspection because the electrician put the wrong kind of wire in for our combi oven, right? Which I didn't know what a combi oven was until 6 months ago.
Me
But
neither.
now I do. But we basically lost three business days because of that. And
Wow.
if we didn't have, in my opinion, a good team and good relationships, it would have cost us 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's just one issue on a project. A development project, you continuously get hit in the face.
Mm.
And I think the lesson I would take away from it is, you need a team that's constantly learning. And all right, this is an issue. What are options to solve it, right? And second, having really good relationships with vendors. I don't call you guys much in a panic. It's probably the first time I've ever done it in like 5 years, but I did.
Yeah, no, that's what made me be like, all right, well, Duke doesn't call me that often.
But you guys helped.
Yeah.
Within an hour, we had what we needed, and then we got to the city and blah blah blah. But without the knowledge and the team, but also the relationships, it would have cost us 3 weeks. We would not be sitting here today. We wouldn't be opening today because we would have lost 3 weeks.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And you bring up a good point, because we work with some people that everything's a crisis.
Yeah.
So nothing's a crisis. Where when you called me directly, I was like, either this is, a funny meme that you got, or we were talking about some podcast idea, or something's going down, so I'm like, what's going on? And then like, you're like, hey, I need this revision real quick. I'm like, great, easy. That's easy to respond to very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think your team is very good at it. Adam, you too. I've never worked with you, Charlie, but like generally good at understanding when something needs to be made urgent to a vendor and when it's otherwise a call, or, I don't know how you train for that, or whether that's or hire for that. I don't know. How would you replace yourself if you had to hire another Adam?
I don't know. I mean, it just kind of comes down to people skills, and like, some people, they just develop those social skills and how to talk to people and how to be responsive like that. Those are things I think, Duke, you look for most people you hire, are just kind of the intangibles, and just, there's a lot of things people can learn at different rates, different paces, but, we tend to hire and get people that, or keep open minds and know how to communicate. Just those intangibles that are harder to teach. And
experience too, like knowing when to escalate something. Experience, right? Like if it's your first deal, everything's an emergency, and you've done 30 deals, you realize everything is an emergency, and you learn to figure out when it really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it just y'all three on the team, or
on the development team? Yes.
Okay.
Oh, hell yeah. So what was your first deal?
I would say my first commercial deal was 409 East Main, office building where we were in for 10 years. So recently,
we did that one. That was
that the Gather building?
there, right?
That's the original Gather, 2014.
OG Gather.
Yeah.
Oh, I got you. Yeah.
But I don't think. When did you guys start?
We were actually probably close to that time. It's like 2015 ish.
Okay.
Is legally like when it became an LLC.
Right.
2016. I think I met Jeff through that, and I think
Jeff Bunch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't Urban Core used to have an office there?
Yes.
Yeah,
We developed that with Andy and Jeff at Urban Core. So they were in the basement, we were on the top floor, and Gather was in the middle floor.
Right.
And they're not. They moved or
They moved to 2120 Staples Mill.
Yeah.
About 2 years ago.
We did that one too.
Yeah, with
because Urban
Walter.
Core is there now on the third floor, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm gonna test this to see if my mom did this on purpose.
Okay.
Hey, Mom. Or Kelly, whoever you are. Hey, what's up, Mom? Oh, okay. Well, you're live right now with us. Do you want to ask Duke a question? Okay. Well,
I have a question for you, Kelly. Well, was your son always such a maniac that liked to learn stuff at a young age? Did he dive into things at a young age? Like when he was like 7 and 8, what was he like reading? What was he into back then? Yeah.
you're breaking up a little bit, Mom.
Well,
you're breaking up a little bit.
With
But
that kind of mind, there's only 2 things he could have been. One was an engineer, and 2 was a serial killer.
Yeah.
So.
You know what? Speaking of that, my mom thought I might be a serial killer because one time I tested the theory that cats land on their feet all the
Jesus
time.
Christ.
Oh yeah.
By actually trying to test with my cat by dropping it out the second story window. I was a kid. I was like, well, no, I Mew. She lived. But I was testing it and upside down. She did. I was like, "Oh, cool." So I'm a kid, all right. I don't do this anymore.
Okay.
So I took it out the second story window and I dropped her, and she landed on her feet, in a bush safely.
A true scientist would have done it 100 times. Not
Yeah,
just
I know,
once.
right? I was a poser. All right, Mom. I'll let you go. Thank you for joining us. Love you. But yeah, that was the moment where I think she thought, "Oh my goodness, what's this child up to?" But no, I didn't do any other animal experiments in my life. That was the moment.
Nothing in the microwave.
Yeah, nothing else. That was as far as I took it. But yeah, that was I think probably scary for her. But yeah, Mom, thanks for joining us. Oh man, so Charlie, I don't tell us where do you fit into this equation? How'd you get involved here?
Oh, that's an interesting question. It's a little bit hard to answer sometimes, but I do a little bit of everything. I guess my main function is asset management. Is what they call it. So I do most of the management above the property management for the properties that we own at like an owner level.
Mhm.
So that is, I'd say, 75% of my day.
Asset management. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, so because we're such a small team, like we all got to be pretty agile.
Mhm.
So there's things we all jump on together. Like Charlie, yes, he's our asset manager, but he helps significantly with construction management. He helps with our draw requests. He's starting to help with underwriting.
Yeah.
So we kind of
investor relations.
yeah, investor relations. We all kind of tag team things together. And yeah, Charlie, he's learning. He's doing great.
He's a dog.
yeah.
Charlie's a dog.
Yeah,
Charlie,
dog.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I kind of like the variety. So I like doing a little bit of everything. So
the asset.
We totally get that over here on the side.
Oh yeah, you kidding me? We're running a podcast. If only you could see the random shit we put up here to try to pretend like we know what we're doing. But so the asset management's interesting. You mentioned a whole lot of things that we should talk about. So underwriting. How do you train somebody? What's the first thing that people should understand about underwriting if you're trying to train somebody that?
So I think most developers are like, I would say 80% of a quant, which that's me. Like I can build a spreadsheet, I can build a model, and I've done that through, I've studied finance in college and did webinars and ULI classes or whatever. But like Adam went to school for it, like deeper understanding of it. So I think, you got to be good at math. You have to have deep math background, but also study financial analysis and underwriting. Actually study it, not just pretend to do it like I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your degree is a business degree, I'm assuming, of some sort. From where, and you learned underwriting?
Yeah, so at first I was an engineer, like I was a civil engineer undergrad,
Mm.
and so engineering math is just so much different than financial math. Like I barely knew what a discount cash flow was or a present value, what that meant
Mm.
out of engineering school, because all we did, linear algebra, differential equations, stuff that was totally unrelated to financial math. So I
Yeah.
went back to business school to learn the financial math component, and so I think like learning that it's simple, it's not overly complicated, but it's just a different way to think about, how to, utilize math to get to solve a problem. And then I'd also say with that, like just being good at Excel is just so critical to our underwriting. Like we have, I've worked with like more complicated models, and I've learned kind of just like going through them, like you could really simplify these things and get, within 99% of where the complicated model that gives you all these different scenarios and inputs will get to you.
All right, let me give
Like-
you a test.
God.
All right, I want to open up a golf facility,
Yeah.
a driving range. How do I underwrite that? How do I even start thinking about making that deal work?
Okay. So do you want to rent it to an operator, or do you want to do the operation yourself?
I want to. Oh, I see. So do I want to run the business, or do I want to
Do you want
build
to
a
own the
thing?
real estate? Do you want to run the business? Do you want to do both?
Holy shit, that's good.
what
I
we
wouldn't
do.
even have thought
That's a
about
good
that question.
question.
All right, so I want to own the real estate, and I
Yeah.
want to somehow partner with somebody to be the operator. How does that look?
Okay. So you essentially want to open like a Top Golf.
Yeah,
I'm like,
of course.
Okay. So I mean, that's an interesting aspect. I guess you would call that like a retail use. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, like, so that would have a higher yield on cost you'd be seeking, which means when you're building it, you're going to want to get your net cash flow is going to be greater, than what you would get for a multifamily. So
Because why?
because like the risk profile is higher. You have one tenant, it's a lot riskier. It's more
Oh
risk-
shit, yeah. Because if they're not your tenant, you're down to zero, and now your property.
And,
is-
yeah. How many
And-
people are going to buy it from you and use it for the exact same
Yeah.
use? Yeah.
Mm.
And when we say like residential is the least risky, it's because usually you have a lot of units that you can diversify over, and everyone always needs a roof over their head. During a recession, people may scale back on their golf, driving range use or anything like that, or other retail uses. So that's why,
There's a lot of
There's-
buyers for that building.
yeah,
And so for just a quick side, so on the residential, you mentioned this with the banks too. You have a vacancy rate that you include on that calculation, right? So there's a built-in like estimated vacancy rate, whereas commercials like, are you or are you not leased?
Right.
Straight hardcore. So if Top Golf is gone, that whole building is like, shit, do I get another operator?
Right.
Right. Okay. So
That affects the cap rate. So that affects maybe the vacancy rate, but also the cap rate. So
yeah.
so like if it's a Class A multifam, the bank may allow you to underwrite it maybe 5% vacancy. It's a little older, maybe 7%. But if it's a retail center with 5 tenants, and each of the leases are 3 to 5 years, the vacancy rate they might plug in a higher number, but also the cap rate will be much higher as well because of the risk.
So the cap rate is a reflection of risk. So the higher that, so a 5 cap is what I feel like everybody's like dream cap rate is when I just read on Twitter. I don't know, I'm not a developer, but a 10 cap's like a higher rate thing, right? You're saying that I can't get as much for every dollar free cash flow value of the building.
Right.
With
Correct.
that, with
That's
that
correct.
higher number. So that might be. So are you saying that a Top Golf? My idea of this Top Golf is higher, would by definition be a higher cap rate. Like, and how do you even determine that with the bank? How do you sell them on what the cap rate even is?
So I mean, the bank's going to look at your net operating income, and basically they're going to say, okay, we either buy what you're underwriting and your budget and all that, and they're going to look at comparables, and something like that's probably not going to have much. So they're going to probably require a lot of like reserves put up of your own cash, or several guarantees that say, hey, we're going to, my personal net worth and liquidity is going to be behind this if it fails.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the bank knows market cap rate for most asset types because they ask around. They can ask developers, ask brokers, like, what are these things actually trading at in the last 6 months? Because it moves,
Yeah.
right? Like multifamily property in Scottish and a year and a half ago might have sold for 3.5 to 4 cap. It's going to sell for closer to maybe 5 today.
5.25, yeah.
And then, but it's always changing. So banks are always asking people, what did that trade at? What did that trade at?
Wow. Okay. So you mentioned brokers, and that's something new to me that I've been seeing on Twitter about like, don't bite the hand that feeds you. Like brokers are essential in this. What does a broker relationship look like for a developer? How important is that?
It varies by developer. We have a couple brokers in house at Dodson Commercial. We work with them a lot, and we rely on them a lot to just find us a bunch of deals, and they're willing to put in offers on 10 or 20 properties, no one only going to buy 1 or 2 of them maybe.
Mhm.
Some developers try to cut out brokers and do it themselves because they're trying to save that buck.
Mhm.
For example, if that broker is going to make 2%, 3%, whatever of that deal, that developer thinks, well, if I find it myself, I can get it for 1 or 2 or 3% cheaper.
Yeah.
And maybe that's right, but maybe, if you do 1 deal a year, maybe that's right. If you're trying to do 3 to 5 a year, you need a lot of deal flow. So I think, if you do a particular type of deal over and over again, then you definitely want to know those 3 or 4 brokers in the area that specializes in that type of deal. So they know if it fits these parameters, bring it to me first, and then I'll pounce on it.
Yeah.
And so I think relationships like that can be pretty valuable.
The broker, how do you, do they set that rate up front when you go under contract with them, like 1%, 2%, 3%, or is it part of the negotiation for each
Yeah,
project?
and on the residential side, it's been a standard for years, and you've probably seen the news lately. The public's pushing back on that, but commercial side, it's been more negotiated. There's still a range that's, I would say, standard. If a broker is listing the property for you, you're gonna have that discussion up front. Like, for this type of property, I'll list it for this percent, and I would like to include this percent for the buyer's broker. Some commercial deals don't pay the buyer's broker anything, and the selling party will say, if you use a broker buyer, you got to pay him yourself because I'm not doing it.
Mhm.
So it's a little more Wild West than the residential side.
Well, so if you're listening, broker, I think is just the commercial word for agent, like, right? Real estate agent. It's a
Yeah,
broker.
yeah.
It sounds cool. Broker.
Yeah, on the residential side, agent and broker are 2 different things. On the commercial side, it's pretty much the same word.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
I've wondered that because I see it. I'm always on a broker. Real estate transactions have always confused me. Who's
Yeah.
the parties and the insurance? It's weird.
Yeah, on the residential side, a broker is like supervisory in nature. They
Yeah.
supervise agents, and agents have to report to, hang their license with the broker.
Uh-huh.
And that's still true on the commercial side, but everybody locally just calls everybody brokers.
So you're putting a deal together. We got our Top Golf idea, and so when do you even, like, you got this spreadsheet? You got to think of a cost somehow.
Mm-hmm.
How do you even start?
So, I mean, it kind of starts like we look at each deal as like its own little business plan. And so you start with creating a budget to buy it, like your cost of the land, the cost of construction, all your soft costs, any fee or interest carrier you have to have, any contingency you want to have.
Yeah.
And to build something out like that, I mean, it's so unique that, I don't have too much experience building top golf or something like that.
You would
but
call
it's-
like 5 of your finance
Yeah.
friends and said, "You guys ever underwritten one of these deals? And like, can you get me some comps?" Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like net, like it's like single tenant uses that. Yeah, there's certain ways to underwrite them, and there's certain developers or acquisition firms that specialize in that. But if you were to go ground up on that, like that's just something, it's like probably a pretty heavy site job, like, and you do have some specialty trades.
Yeah.
So it'd be hard to kind of figure out the construction costs with that, but you'd want to get some sort of advice from a GC of, just at least the skeleton and the site work, what it costs,
Yeah.
and then try to get an estimate for everything you can.
Yeah, like there's not any GCs in Richmond probably that have built a Top Golf, but there's 3 to 5 in the country that have that. You're welcome to call them, and they would say, "Yeah, I'm telling you the number if I can, if I can try to build it for you. Happy to tell you
Yeah.
what it might cost." Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
dance, right?
Yeah.
You got to constantly play that dance. Like, I'm kind of interested. How much can I get from you before I sign this
Yeah.
giant
Right, yeah.
contract?
Yeah. And if you're under, like, the next step would be to figure out your cash flows and your, how much are you going to make and how much, and therefore, like, what kind of debt can you get? So from there, it's like, well, if you're just owning the real estate and renting it, it might be pretty easy to just, figure out, okay, what are they renting? You could have comps that show like they're getting this much rental rate. They're getting triple net expenses, which means that the leaseholder is actually paying for all the taxes, insurance, common area maintenance, stuff like that. And then you have some, minor costs that cover that. So you can figure out what's my cash flow going to be.
Yeah.
And then before you even get to the debt equation, that's where I mentioned yield on cost earlier. And that's where you want to say, okay, what's my, stabilized cash flow when I add up all my revenues, all my operating expenses, before I even factor in debt, CapEx, capital expenses.
Mhm.
And then what am I building this thing for, all in, and not just construction, but every single cost that goes into this. And if you're building something that's a lot lower than your interest rate, you're in the black. You're in the red.
Mm.
You're not making any money on that deal. And that's like one of the first kind of hurdles that we look at is like, is this deal even worth it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where we come in today, where it's like this weird environment where our yield on cost is like hovering around the same, where interest rates are these days.
Yeah.
And we're basically, a lot of developers saying, well, market cap rates are still here and we hope that they'll still be there, but you really got to improve like something, whether it's lowering your budget or increasing your revenues to make a deal make sense.
Or the cap rate changes, I guess.
Or like, yeah, and that's, you know, typically when you underwrite, you look at today's cap rate and you add expansion, which means you add, you know, 0.5% on top of that to try to make sure, you know, maybe in the future it'll be lower, but we need to at least guess it might be a little bit higher because it all ties back to that risk premium that we talked about earlier.
That's, to me, it's wild. A lot of ways it's kind of a guess the way it is for, I talk about HVAC load calcs with people, and people think HVAC is this perfect science. It's not. It's a giant guess. It's like we sort of think that based on what you've described and what we think the weather will do for 20 years, that this will work probably. And I know it's going to cost you $250,000, but it'll probably be okay.
And that's just how construction is in general. Like the farther along you are, hopefully you're guessing less.
Yeah.
Like once you're in the site, like you do a geotech, you do 5 or 6 borings or maybe more depending on the size of the site.
Yeah.
But think about how many other things could be, you know, not represented in those profiles. And you encounter unsuitable soils, which we try to budget in all of our projects because it always seems to happen where you've got export, you got to bring in additional suitable soil that can be compacted to the right way. And so as you get farther along, hopefully there's less conflicts, there's less area for just, you know, misses, whether it's the design, the contractor, or what you're carrying in your budget. But it's all a guess, even what you're designing too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy to me. It reminds me, we talked to life safety folks, which is like a complete super nerd category, but like I realized that it's all a guess. Like their models are much of a guess as ours, as yours. You're modeling it. You're trying to make your best educated guess based on previous things, but you really don't know what to put in all these numbers, which is, you know, what I don't know. I think of all those people, life safety engineers, mechanical, and then developer engineers, we'll call it financial engineering kind of in a lot of ways. It's very similar inputs, very similar thought processes. What's likely to happen here? What may happen? So let's just say we got on Top Golf project. We figured it out. We got our underwriting. You figure out the cost. Duke, what do you do from there? Like, what does it look like? You got your perfect spreadsheet. Y'all have figured it out. Like, what's the first call you make to try to actually get the deal to work when you're confident in the underwriting?
Yes, sir. You call a lender. You call some lenders you've worked with before. Like, is this a deal?
Yeah, it's not really like the one first call. It's like you're always making all of these calls. So like you're always talking to bankers and figuring out where they're at, like where interest rates, like loan to cost, where they're going to be, their comfort level, this type of deal in this environment. You're always talking to investors to understand what's their requirement, you know, return on equity. Like what does their cash on cash need look like? What does their IR need to look like? And you're always calling brokers and like, you know, what's it trading at? Like, so there's never really a first call. It's you build a model, you make calls, you edit it, you make calls, you make more calls, you edit it again. Like it's like
iterative,
very iterative. Yeah,
that's crazy. And so it's the lenders, and you mentioned investors. How do you structure that? Is this like there's all types of investor structures, right? Limited partnerships and all of this.
A million structures. Yeah, I would say if you're looking for what's typical, I would say the developer. Investors usually want the developer to have some skin in the game, and so the developer might put in 5 to 20% of the equity in a typical deal, and then go raise the rest from other people. Some developers have like a go-to investor they go to first to put in all or like a good chunk of the equity and then build it out the rest from there. Some just pass the hat and will get 50 different checks from 50 different people. It's 1,000 different ways, but the typical structure might look like the developer charges some type of development fee that goes to the developer. Maybe they also charge a construction management fee that goes to whoever's managing the construction, us, or maybe we pay somebody to do it. And then usually the investor gets a certain return on their money, and then anything above that gets split. Investor gets some, developer gets some. That's just, again, there's 1,000 ways to skin the cat, but that's typically how it works.
For somebody getting involved in that, I mean, how do they even start being somebody who raises capital? I mean, how do you start being like, hey, do you got like $1 million or something? Or
yeah, I mean, some people come up in the big deal world and they get experience doing big deals, working for someone else, and then through that they get the confidence to do it themselves, or they, build relationships like that we are building now, and they see us doing good deals, and they go do their own. They can go raise money. I started on the small deal side and just did one house, and I did a duplex, and I did a 6-unit building, and so with that one house, I went to someone and explained the deal. It was very informal back then. Like, you put up this money, I do this, you do this. And it went well. So we did another one and another one. And so That's the way I know how to do it. Start real small and take your lumps on the small deals. So as you move up the ladder, you get more and more comfort, more and more confidence, and the market gets more confidence in you. But a lot of people never do small deals, and they just work for larger development firms, and they start at the bottom and work their way up through, and eventually do it themselves.
Yeah, that's wild.
It's part art, part science, and I don't think we have it completely figured out. We always bang our heads against a wall, saying that we can do all this stuff, and to me, raising equity is always like the most headache per hour for
Really?
me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just don't like it. Some people love it. I just don't like asking for money. I like doing the deals, and I wish the money would just magically appear at the door.
Yeah, like do the underwriting. That's kind of you sound like an engineer. That's how I wish I could engineer. Just like
That's
don't.
the people part of it.
Yeah. Well, it just takes sometimes it happens real fast. In some environments, raising equity is very easy. Like in today's environment, it's a little more difficult, and so you might have to have 50 calls to get 8 yeses, and that's what it takes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you make 3 calls and get 3 yeses, and so it depends on the environment a lot.
Man, that is just absolutely wild to me. And then to me, what's crazy, what we like doing this is trying to connect engineers a little bit to what the thought process is, or design the AE side of things, the AEC. I think contractors are more familiar because that's usually the first kind of person you might call, right? Like, can you give me an idea of how much this costs? But then the architect might start to show up, and then later, way down the line, we got these nerds, these MVP nerds, that represent what I've heard, at least around sometimes a third or more of the cost of the construction, and we can be a very big problem for you. So to me, it's always surprising that with such a huge portion of the risk of that contingency that you're deciding, that we are brought in so late in the game. And I'm just like, wow, shit. And so that's probably the same. Life safety is very similar. Suddenly you have a smoke control system that's going to be $2 million. What was it? They were talking about like $1 million per curtain or some crazy shit for like atrium or whatever. You don't know what decisions in your business plan are going to lead to $1 million surprise or something. And how do you, I don't know. I always say it, we've been saying a lot. It's a miracle anything gets built based on how many hurdles you have to jump.
Yeah. So I think one way to avoid that is you build the same type of building over and over and over and over again. Right. And then you get expertise in that type of building, and you know where the pitfalls lie. And if you're like us and you do different types of buildings, pitfalls are always going to be there. And so what Adam does, he likes to underwrite contingency, not just one contingency line item, but he underwrites a little bit of contingency in each of the buckets. And 5 of the things won't go wrong. And so you have some savings there. And then the 3 things that go wrong, hopefully you've got enough in your contingency to withstand it. But as you do more and more deals, you make more and more mistakes, and more things cause pain. You learn to not make those mistakes again, and that you'll avoid making that one a second time.
So Charlie, on you, what is your background? Where did you?
I went to VCU and studied finance, and I graduated in the fall of 21.
Mm-hmm.
Then I was an intern for a real estate investment company for about 9 months, where I did mostly asset management work.
Yeah.
And then after that, I got a job with Dodson Development Group. And so that's where I am. And I've been here for 2.5 years now. So
yeah, that's wild. And how does it feel to be?
Feels great.
Yeah.
I'm learning a new thing every day. So it's, yeah.
That's a cool environment, because I'm sure you are learning an insane amount of stuff from these guys.
Right. Charlie, a year ago, had never dealt with the health department. And now he is the preeminent expert on dealing with health department for opening up restaurants.
Oh, yeah.
3-0. So
3-0. Undisputed.
Yeah.
Undisputed health department champion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hold
That's
on a
like
sec.
It's Charlie never knew.
Little
The
delay.
inside guy.
Charlie never knew that was going to be a niche he was going to create.
Yeah.
for
I
himself.
never thought I'd be doing that. So, but no, I've learned a lot in the process. So.
Have you? When was the restaurant, the Drift and Muse, your first soiree into that?
So we did the wine and cheese shop Circa in Colonial Beach, which you went to.
Yeah.
You remember we drank wine there?
Yeah.
So that was Charlie's first dabbling with the health department, and he had to figure it out because none of us knew what we were doing, and he figured it out. And then he did Drift Muse.
Yeah.
Muse opened in January, and then now this is the 3rd one here.
Restaurants sound crazy. My wife's a chef, or a former chef. She's now stay at home, and we do homeschooling. But she lived that life of the chef, and it's like nights, weekends, crazy, all type of hours. And to me, that just seems so stressful in that world of restaurants, because I always compare it. I may be wrong, but I used to run a recording studio, and it's kind of like trying to make money racing cars. Like you just buy a bunch of expensive shit, and you pretty much never win a race. Restaurants probably aren't that way, but it feels that way when I look at the equipment list and how expensive everything
man.
is, man.
Oh man, well that's why you see at Drift to Muse we have one kitchen and not two, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we talk about all the time. Well, we
Yeah.
said here, don't put a hood. Just whatever you do, don't get anything that needs a hood. For the love of God, that's going to
Yeah.
be a problem. And or if you have a hood, shorter, the better. Like
Right.
Chipotle, we bring it up all the time. You go to Chipotle, that 10-foot hood cranks out however many millions of dollars a year of burritos.
Yeah.
You can make a restaurant work. You know, it's like for us, we try to talk to the owners as soon as possible, the operators. A big kind of how we chatted with y'all. Like, just don't do a 25-foot hood. I mean, unless you want to pay me $30,000 to like redo it, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Avoid bends too.
Bends?
Yeah, no bends.
Yeah.
As many as you can, at least.
Oh, in the hood
Yeah.
itself?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
top one, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I would probably increase the rates of ventilation or something.
Just cleaning, it's a pain. So yeah,
Oh.
like the operating cost for that. It's like, I mean, yeah, it's well,
Operating expense. That reminds me. You mentioned something. CapEx.
CapEx.
What is
yeah.
that magic word? I hear it all the time. I don't know what the hell it even means.
Yeah, capital expenses. So it's basically we call it below the line, which means below net operating income. They're expenses that are non-recurring that you kind of are expecting, you know, infrequently. So say, you know, you want to pave your parking lot. Say it's a major HVAC replacement.
Yeah.
Or, you know, you're replacing new flooring as like a renovation. It's things that are just non-recurring, like the recurring expenses, like your property taxes, your electricity, utility bills.
Yeah.
But it's something that's, you know, you're not expecting, and you can capitalize it, which you can. I'm not an accountant, but there's certain other ways that you classify it and I'm treating it.
So does that get something that you can't expense that year and you have to depreciate it over 7 years or something?
It's the rate of depreciation is different for it.
I got you. Okay. So it's a category. It's a specific
Mhm.
category for accounting purposes.
Yep.
It sounds cool though.
It's not as cool when you're writing the check.
Oh yeah. When you got a
Yeah.
unit that went down.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got a rental right now that it's an old refrigerant and I still haven't replaced that damn air handler.
Is that R22?
Yeah. R22. Like, damn it. That's a CapEx, I suppose. I got to replace the whole freaking thing. I thought I could do the coil and now I got to do the whole unit. Cause
Tell your tenant, like, man, it's a CapEx, man.
yeah.
It'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah. Jesus. But yeah, so we did plumbing and what kind of things did Permazip do totally fucking wrong on this one?
I mean, I don't think this job it wasn't overly complicated. Like I think electrical was kind of the was the hard one.
Mm-hmm.
But this was, you know, like it was fairly straightforward from what I saw. You know, we didn't change too much with the structure. We didn't put too many new rooms, partitions up. Therefore, we didn't need mechanical drawings. You know, I mean, I think we rerouted one of the sanitary lines a little bit, but it was generally within, like, you guys don't put exact locations. It's really contract verification is what you guys do on the drawings,
Yeah.
especially for something like
You
this.
say that again, Adam, please.
Yeah.
That we don't do that on the drawings.
Trust me,
Jesus.
I tell them that too. Yeah. No, I mean, it was a pretty straightforward one for the most part. Like Duke said, like I was in here actually when the wire came up with the electrician putting in the aluminum, but
Yeah, Charlie dealt with my
Yeah.
wrath that day.
That was on a Friday, right?
It was.
I
Yeah.
got-
Because I,
got
was
the
out
calm
that day
Duke
too.
that day.
He sent me a text like, "Can you look at this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll look at it."
I know I've crossed
for Adam and Duke.
into the full Duke if I get that crazy. Tom Dickey has finally crossed that line where he called me. He's like, "Kid, what the fuck? Where's my fucking submit?" You know, I'm like, all right, Tom. And then I got off the phone. Shout out, Tom. All the respect. But then I got off the phone and who is Scott who works for him. He's like, "Oh, that's Tom. He gets that way sometimes." I was like, "Yeah, I get it. You know, it's got to be stressful as
Yeah, I mean, like
hell
you
when that stuff goes
look
down."
at like this, like how many things are like in line, right? Like, so like that day, we were supposed to get electrical pass that day, which was a Friday, to get our final on a Monday, to get our CO on a Tuesday, to get our health department on a Wednesday,
yeah.
ABC later that day, and then the kitchen needed 1 full week of training so we could open. We were supposed to do our soft opening 2 days ago, and we didn't. So like that one electrician messing with that one thing
Mhm.
messed up the entire process. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so now, like tonight, we're doing a sneak peek of the restaurant. So we're basically losing an entire week of our restaurant operation because that electrician made one mistake. And it could have been 3 weeks, right? That's the
Yeah.
point. It could have been 3. It could have been worse.
That's wild.
Yeah.
We're so disconnected from that, and that's
Yeah.
where the relationships come in. And we
Yeah.
don't even think we do now because of the podcast. But before the podcast, we didn't even
Yeah.
think about that. 3 business
Yeah.
days.
yeah.
Chris at Benny's brought it up about you guys having like staff coming in or flying in to
Right.
train. Like we don't think
Right.
think about that. We've never thought about that until.
Well,
the
and that goes
podcast.
back to relationships and empathy, right? And like instead of me calling and screaming at you, can you fucking do this? What did I say? I said, hey, listen, I really need you,
Yeah.
and here's why, right? And then what did you do? You understood, and you called your team. Your team helped, and you knew that like we wouldn't pull that trigger unless we absolutely needed to, and we wouldn't have done it unless if this was the critical path, right?
Yeah.
And the critical path affects a lot of people. In fact, all those people back there have jobs, right? They can't work for a week,
Yeah.
if we don't get that electrical passed. You know what I mean?
That's the Benny's Pizza. Chris was talking about just that,
Yeah.
like the idea that we're talking about coordination, trying to align the opening labor that's required that has to be coordinated with the CO or for the more important thing, the podcast. When is that going to be done?
Yeah.
Right.
Like you're putting people up in hotels to train for a week.
Yeah,
and
they were
all
flying.
that
You were
gets
flying
canceled.
folks in for the Drift and Muse, right? Like
Yeah.
you had people coming in,
Yeah.
and just imagine they're
Yeah.
flying everybody in and being
And
like
just sitting there.
3
Yeah.
weeks. So it helps me understand why somebody would be screaming when I pick up the phone. But it definitely, a lot of what we've been learning at PermaZip is just the skill of tempering yourself in the industry. 'Cause it
Yeah.
can be pretty damn insane. Like how do you have it? Like you just got like perfect temperament.
I mean, there's some times where I have not kept that temperament.
Adam's so like
But-
even keel all the time. Chill.
I wish I had a scene, a cut scene of that right now.
No,
Same
I
to
mean,
you. I mean, as far as I know.
Yeah, no, Adam's gotten so much better at it, and I thought I was perfect at it, and then like the last 6 months, like I've screamed more than I've ever screamed, and like I don't like it, but it's just like I joked the other day, I was like, some things wouldn't have happened if I didn't throw a tantrum here, like they
Yeah.
wanted to do things 2 weeks later, and I was like, no, I needed to. So I think be nice people. Have empathy for what they're going through. Ask nicely first, but there's times, this is a business, man. You got to put your foot down, and if
Yeah.
Yeah.
throwing a tantrum gets it done, and sometimes that tantrum needs to be thrown, unfortunately, in my opinion.
I feel like we try to do that only when it's something we've like asked for repeatedly,
Mhm.
because like we understand people will make mistakes.
Yeah.
But if it's something like, like on this project, we never had any submittals. Like it's a small project, you normally don't expect it for something like this. But
Yeah.
just sometimes when you don't get a submittal until 2 weeks before you need it, and then they're putting the burden on you guys to turn it around.
Yeah.
It's just things like that. You're like, come on, like we talked about this beginning, like let's get our submittals created, get everything in, because especially since COVID, things are just out. Like it's always been this way, but even more so, supply chain issues with just having to get replacements for certain equipment, certain materials,
Mm-hmm.
and just things that are like very easily could have been avoided are the most frustrating things. But you still know like people make mistakes, and you try to work with them and not, most people work better without the gun to their head.
Yeah, and it's real hard to keep that. But yeah, to your point, you still also just need like, dude, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, how many times I have to say this, and it's tough knowing that that's still somebody you might want to work with in the future, and relationships. But if you can work through that and have somebody where you've like maybe screamed at, but still can attest. I've screamed at Phil before. He might be listening.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure Phil deserved it though.
yeah, I mean, Phil fucking just, needed to
Yeah,
be
who's that
screamed
Phil
at
guy?
that day. I'm just kidding. But like, we all lose it. We try to keep our heads. We try to stay professional, but this industry is insanely stressful. Not any more or less than any other. I'm just, I only know construction, and it's just insane. The pressure that can
Yeah.
mount. And when you work to build relationships, one of the primary like reasons for the podcast is to just find a time to just sit down and fucking,
Yeah.
not talk about a submittal.
Yeah. I mean, you nailed it though. And we talked about it earlier, like it's just the unknowns that come up, and there's so many unknowns.
Yeah.
And even when I think you said it better when you said educated guesses
Yeah.
about what we're designing, because there's all, code and standards. But yeah, I mean, there's so many educated guesses you guys have to make, and so many codes that may not be the best way to apply the way we want to build things. But, it's just keeping the cool is hard in a really stressful environment like construction.
Yeah, man.
Adam's got a good like proactive approach. I appreciate that. I mean,
I try. Like,
if something's important to you, you'll send me an email, then you'll call. We won't bug. Like, hey, just want to make sure you got that, and it lets me know that's important to you. We all get hundreds of emails every single day, but like picking up the phone when you know it's important is a good thing. I appreciate that.
No, it helps just to talk things through too, because it's like just living on email, you're probably not going to get those rapid a response, and a lot of people, they're all very busy.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it helps me understand, at least just talking it through on the phone.
Yeah, the email can become lost very quickly too.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll get 100 in an hour or something, and most of it's like spam from some crap that somehow got signed up, and I can't even keep track of it. And now Procore, which I love Procore, but now it becomes a spam thing. Like
That was the first thing you mentioned on the Forest Hill project. When I get an email for every single submittal that goes in or RFI that's unrelated to me.
It's funny because Kurt, him and I had it out at each other.
Yeah.
He was like, "You want me to fucking customize my shit for you, Kurt and Kenny?" I'm like, "Yeah. I mean, if you want to have my attention, then yes, Kurt. If you need my attention, then you need to specifically attempt to get my attention. Because if if you feel like that, I will respond to a Procore like you and every other fucking person gives me a Procore email. I won't even see it.
Yeah.
I literally won't see it for a week and a half, and then and then you can't be upset for me if that's all you put into this very important thing for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that it sounds like I'm being a drama queen, but I'm just saying, Kurt, if it's important to you that you have my attention, get me on the fucking phone.
Shout out to Kurt.
Yeah.
He's good about calling though.
Yeah,
He'll
no, I'm
call.
not trying to bust on Kurt, but Kurt, that was the
generally
fight
the
we had. He was
approach.
like, "Fine, Kenny, I'll give you a fucking custom." I was like, "Sure."
Kurt, I mean, it seems like he's got a lot on his plate. You know, he's got a lot of projects he's working on constantly, and I appreciate his ability to kind of juggle and stay on top of things.
Oh yeah.
That's definitely not everyone can do that.
Well, Kurt's one of our favorites to talk about as a good communicator. Although I just described, I just described him and I fighting on a phone call together. I love Kurt because he's so good at just getting something solved in the moment. He'll say, "Can I try to call the plumber right now? Can you just get it solved?" And he'll connect, let the nerds talk, and then get a solution. He's really good at that. Proactive.
He's very direct.
Yeah. And it's like that's great, But when he gets pissed at me about a Procore email, I'm like, "Kurt, what do you expect me to do? You and everybody else, I can't fucking keep up with all this stuff, and I don't know which one's a reminder, which one's to me, which one's this." And you're good at that, texting, keeping up with it, reminding us gently, like, "Hey,
Well, the actual email gets lost too, but then even if you see the email, there's a lot that gets lost within the email, like a lot of context.
Yeah,
right?
And then if you have like a chain of like 30 emails, and you have to open all of them
Somebody
up.
just forwarded you an email with chains
and
with
then there's
no
a new
context
thread.
at all.
Yeah. So
you will rue the day," as I feel.
I guess Duke talking about Phil deserved to be screamed at.
Oh yeah. Phil commented here as permanent, "You will rue the day," because I screamed at him. Oh yeah, if you're listening, we got some folks listening. Don't feel there's links in the early comments. Scroll back and you can join in and ask questions. We got developer and construction experts with us right now here at Graybos. Cool building. We drank the first round, I think, here, which is awesome.
First
That's the
round of
second
Parlay.
time with the Dodson project. Yeah, that's awesome. And so we're having the first beers here, and go ahead and call in if you have questions. We can get you live questions or shoot them in the comments here. Let's see if we got anybody on X. But yeah, so Duke disappeared.
I mean, what do you guys like? What are some qualities you like on the developer side? Like, how early do you like getting involved? What's you talk about like temperament that we have versus some others, but like, what are some other things you appreciate?
Early as possible to get involved, and then the question about what we appreciate is, Kurt's got this strength, and so do you, Adam, is knowing just enough to be able to ask a good question.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get so deep in the weeds on one thing, we'll like nerd out on that thing, but you're like, "Hey, this might be a dumb question, but XYZ." And it's actually not a dumb question. It's a good question. And then once we get to that solution, just kind of trusting it and running with it. Like for this project, for example, we had to get the load summary on those existing circuits.
Yeah.
That's my headaches per hour that Duke mentioned, like is verifying existing load. And with you, it was like, cool, I'll get with the contractor and do it. And we were able to do it, and that panel was able to stay. So trusting the consultants, but also asking those what people think are dumb questions or not dumb questions. A good mix of that is a good developer to work with, for in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's like, I think most of the time it's like you guys are the experts here, you guys and our contractor, and it's like I know I'm asking things that, maybe some of them are just off base or like, why are you even asking this? But every now and then there's sometimes there's a good one that can help steer the design or help on the budget. So they kind of keep us moving forward too, rather than, I mean, you probably deal with like some indecisive developers too that are just really hard or changing their mind, and it's really frustrating. And like I certainly have struggled with that in the past, but I think as you do more projects, you start to learn more exactly what you want, and not try to redesign the thing once you got CDs ready and ready for permit drawings, because that's the farther along you get, it seems like the harder it is for you guys to make changes, and then all the coordination that could mess up other drawings and other engineers, what they're doing.
Yeah. Sometimes because we're not in the field a whole lot once construction starts, and a lot of times the developer will be spending more time with the contractors, and they'll have an idea, and we appreciate those ideas, but a lot of times the developers are point of contact. So you might come to me and say, "Hey, Carter, I want to do specifically XYZ," right? Instead of, And we've gotten better about trying to ask this, like, what are you after, right?
Mhm.
Hey, I want to move this light to over here. Instead of us just doing it, it's like, well, what are you after, right?
Yeah.
Because the electrician might have that idea, but communicating and understanding what is the intent,
Right.
because we might have a good solution to be able to add to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how are you guys on like understanding like costs of your design though? Because there's some like I feel like that's what can really separate, and I feel like you guys do like a pretty good job of like balancing of what's going to be best long term and best operationally, and what's going to be most economical and affordable. Like, is that something you guys because that ultimately like money rules a day. What's the
Yeah.
cost of this thing? Like, is that something you guys strive constantly to get better at, or something that always on top of mind?
We've had to learn it for sure. It's not something by default that's top of mind. The podcast has helped a lot with
Yeah.
getting that cost of mind, cost and schedule, and realizing how important it is, especially during that CA. Like, shit, we need this inspection so we can get our finals, so we can get our health inspection, so we can get our ABC license. Like, we naturally so disconnected from that whole process.
Yeah.
It's like, you're telling me you want me to approve this thing, but if I approve this thing, then like I'm responsible for it, and not even connecting the fact that it's tied so closely to schedule or cost.
Yeah.
The podcast has definitely helped. The developers have a unique perspective on cost, because at the end of the day, that's really what it comes
Mhm.
down to.
I think that a lot of financial instrument language would be useful for engineers to put more into. We got engineering econ. You took an engineering degree. I'm sure you had an engineering econ class,
It's like one
Mhm.
class.
but it
Yeah.
barely touches. Like it just teaches you basically how to understand a balance sheet, probably just enough to get you through an exam
Yeah.
and some sort of time value of money,
Mhm.
general concepts, but not enough to really make good judgments and understand
Right.
how your decisions impact the underwriting that you might have put together.
Mhm.
And another thing is operations of businesses and understanding like what it's like to really operate the business, or how the decisions that you make when you think about Topgolf and what you might want to do might, if it just took a small tweak, would
Yeah.
save $500,000. Or like kind of, we talked, this project's a great example.
Yeah.
We've actually mentioned this project that on a couple podcasts. I mean, like, if this is a great example of not adding a little hood, or just a business decision that you and I somehow got early on. And that's
Mhm.
I don't know if that's luck. I would attribute it, if it's not, to you being able to ask the right questions.
Mhm.
So, because engineers generally will just do what we're told.
Mhm.
It's like, you say you want this, we'll do that.
Yep.
And there's no question about like whether we should stop and say, that's a really expensive request. Like what you
Mhm.
just said results in extremely expensive equipment.
Yeah.
We're trying to get better at it, but engineers will always be probably a step or two away, too far
Yeah.
from that.
But that's why, like, getting you involved, or having a contractor that you trust early on to look at like the SDs is just going to help everyone. If they, especially if you all start specing the type of equipment sooner, like
Yeah.
it's just something that that way you don't have to change as much farther along, because some people wait to do a bid build where they they competitively bid it out, they come back with these, and then you guys are hit with all these changes that we want to make when
Yeah.
you already have 90%, 95% drawings. So it's just stuff like that it's good to have good contractors involved early on.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're just joining us, Duke's back. Welcome back. We were just talking about how well engineers do or don't know how expensive what they're speccing is. And that was kind of what we touched early, I think, on our podcast,
Mhm.
trying to make a decision between, is it easy to predict in price versus it's cheaper potentially, but there's going to be all types of RFIs and fucking CA nightmare that's going to cause delays. That's really hard to do on adaptive reuse, especially a smaller project. There's not enough time to figure all that shit out. That's a tough one.
Ask me any more tough questions. I got to bounce. So,
Oh,
you have
okay.
any last any
We're
bangers for me?
we're about time anyway.
Oh
so.
yeah, we're about ready to wrap up. Do you have okay, so what did how did you start, who did you reach out to get the operator side? Is this like an operator situation, or are you part of the operations, or?
For these two businesses?
Yeah.
So Gray and Fitz and I decided to start Graybo Sports Cards a year ago. So
Yeah.
we did that over there in the Arts District. And Robin and Kelsey, who are our partners on the restaurant side, I met them about 2 years ago now when we were looking at doing deals in Colonial Beach.
Mhm.
Actually was going to partner with a chef named Mike Ledesma, who ran Perch. And Mike introduced me to Robin, and I met Kelsey around that same time. And Robin was a chef back of house, Kelsey's front of house. And so that we worked on those projects together to open those restaurants. And they, I felt, like the devil you know versus the devil you don't when it comes to starting anything, I felt comfortable doing a third restaurant with them versus a restaurant with a stranger that I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I knew they were talented and were good at what they do, and so basically, yeah, several years of relationships, came together for these businesses.
That's awesome, man. Well, I guess in that case, we hit the hour mark even now after we had to do our second round. So we got in a full hour. So I will say thank you so much for having us and having the first round here.
Yeah.
Something we can celebrate with you.
Thanks for sharing the first beers and parlay with us, boys.
Yeah, appreciate
Absolutely.
it, guys.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
Charlie, Adam.
Thanks, y'all.
Duke.
Sorry, I should.
Appreciate you.
All right.